Here's the part Sopranos fans never admit. Meadow didn't just share gossip about Vito, she weaponized it. In the sprawling catalog of misdeeds committed across the Soprano universe, Meadow's moment of casual disclosure about Vito's extracurricular life barely earns a footnote. Yet it is one of the show's clearest illustrations of how deeply the rot seeps into the supposedly legitimate branches of a mob family. With a single wry smile, half delight in possessing forbidden knowledge, half smug initiation into adult gossip, she effectively hands a man's life to the wolves. Not because she intends to, of course. That would require a level of self-awareness far beyond her reach. She knows perfectly well what her father does and what this world does to Fanooks. But the thrill of sharing a juicy revelation with the older women overpowers any glimmer of conscience. One might imagine she would reflect, even briefly, on the consequences of gossip in a culture where rumor functions as both currency and death sentence. Instead, she gleefully drags Finn into the fray as collateral, shoving him into complicity so fast he barely has time to process the threat Vito had already leveled at him. Finn's horror is treated not as evidence of danger, but as a personal affront. Another man failing to match Meadow's preferred narrative. Naturally, this moment marks the beginning of the end for their relationship. Finn understands exactly what is happening in that back room at Satrial's, and the shame, fear, and sickening awareness of his accidental role in someone's death cling to him with a weight Meadow refuses to acknowledge. He disappears after Vito's murder with all the predictability of a man unwilling to spend his adult life dodging pool cues wielded by homicidal maniacs. Yet when asked directly about the breakup, even cast members have expressed bafflement, as though the show hadn't placed the reason in neon lights. The man had a breakdown because the woman he loved fed him to the lions. The tragedy is that the show offers a nearly perfect psychological map explaining how Meadow reached this point. The scene in which she spills the information reveals less about Vito than it does about the toxic dynamic between Meadow and Carmela. Desperate to be treated as an adult, she shares her gossip with the older women, basking in the illusion that she is functioning as one of them. Carmela shatters that illusion instantly, dutifully passing the information to Tony without a second of hesitation. The mother who demands unconditional respect has none of her daughter's trust in return, and never will. Meadow is not a peer, she is a pawn who has learned that gossip is the only form of agency granted to women in this world. Carmela, unlike her daughter, understands exactly what she is unleashing. She has already watched a bit of harmless chatter nearly get her husband killed, yet the gravitational pull of her own willful blindness wins again. Meadow, for her part, exhibits the same blindness, a convenient, selective ignorance of the violence that defines her father's professional sphere. The fantasy that these men merely deal in stern warnings, harsh words, or the occasional counseling session persists until reality, inevitably, arrives carrying a blunt object. To her credit, or discredit, Meadow does not appear to have intended Vito's death. The act is far pettier, a daughter playing cosmopolitan sophisticate, flexing a tidbit she assumes will remain inside the hermetically sealed circle of mob wife confidants. She imagines herself above the family business, even as she directly contributes to the machinery of bloodshed. The disconnect is almost poetic. And when confronted with Finn's terror, she displays the moral imagination of a spoiled princess. The problem is not that the men around her are dangerous, but that Finn's response disrupts her emotional expectations. She is, in short, becoming Carmela, with a sharper vocabulary and a future law degree. If Meadow bears partial responsibility for Vito's fate, she is far from alone. Vito himself works tirelessly to bring about his own demise, first by attempting to intimidate the boss's future son-in-law, then by parading around a gay bar frequented by mob associates, and finally, by fleeing and returning with all the self-preservation instincts of a man determined to die. His inability to commit to either denial or exile transforms an already precarious situation into a fatal one. And while Meadow's disclosure accelerates the process, The larger forces, New York politics, Phil's personal vendettas, and Vito's compulsive self-sabotage, were already churning behind the scenes. Still, Meadow's role remains significant because she provides the final, irrefutable confirmation. Before Finn's testimony, Vito's fate was not sealed. After it, he has no path forward. The moment an untouchable civilian, connected to the boss yet outside the code of omerta, corroborates the truth, the argument shifts from rumor to obligation. In this culture, a man in Vito's position is expected to silence those who slander him or die. He does neither. The outcome writes itself. Yet the more revealing question is not whether Meadow got Vito killed, but how she later justifies her role in the process. In the absence of any on-screen reckoning, one can assume she folds it neatly into her growing ideological gymnastics. The poverty of the mezzogiorno, cultural expectations, the inevitability of violence. Any intellectual framework she can weaponize to absolve herself of responsibility while preserving the illusion of moral enlightenment. It is denial elevated to art, the Soprano legacy distilled into the next generation. By the end of the series, her transformation is complete. The once idealistic young woman who railed against racism, classism, and injustice now orbits comfortably within the system she once condemned, preparing for a career defending the very men who terrorize her loved ones. She criticizes the world while dining on its spoils. She lectures on ethics while sliding seamlessly into inherited corruption. She becomes, in essence, Carmela, with a professional license to launder the family's sins. And so, Meadow's innocent act of gossip stands as more than a plot point. It is a thesis statement. It reveals the seductive ease with which proximity to power erodes conscience, how quickly intellect is weaponized to excuse violence, and how even those who claim moral superiority can become efficient cogs in the machine. Vito may have sealed his own doom, but Meadow ensured the door slammed shut behind him. A pool cue may have finished the job, but gossip, smiling, careless, and oh so civilized, lit the fuse.